Good morning to everybody and welcome to Monday morning. I know you're all excited that it's Monday because you really are really happy that we have a full week of school with no storm days on the horizon. But we're starting here with 4 warm-up questions, just one-step algebraic questions from grade 7 and grade 8. You were asked to solve each of these with opposite operation. So I'll grab my red marker and we'll start here. Remember, our goal in algebra is always to isolate the variable, which means anything that exists on that side with the variable, we must get rid of by using opposite operation. Since it says -4, we're simply going to add 4 to both sides. And when we add 4, we create a new equation that is still balanced and still equal, but this new equation has an isolated variable, which means the other side will be its solution. And in this case, x's solution is 1. Over here, we want to isolate this variable. We want to get rid of the coefficient of 5. And since that 5 is a multiplier for x, the opposite of that will be division. So we will divide both sides by 5. Now, some people get real confused here because they're like, oh God, 8 can't, it's impossible. You can't divide 8 by 5. You can do it one of 2 ways. I'll show you the first way. It's grab your calculator and divide the numerator, 8, divided by the denominator, 5, and you get your answer of 1.6. Another way to do it is to think of it as an improper fraction. And then think of it as an equivalent fraction with a 10 denominator. And then solve it that way. So I could do that question using improper fractions, mixed fractions with base 10 denominators. 1 6/10 is 1.6. That's another way you could have done it if you did not have a calculator handy. In this case, we want to isolate a number 3. We want to isolate x. We want to get rid of divided by -2. The opposite of dividing by -2 is multiplying by -2. So we're going to multiply both sides by -2. Create a new equation with x equals a positive 6. And finally, our last question says interpret and solve. How much of x do we have? We have a third of x. And the good news is if we know that we have a third of x, there are 3 ways mathematically we can represent that. We can represent it as a coefficient of a third of x equals -2. That's one way. We could also say a third of x, meaning x divided into 3 equal parts, is equal to -2. And the other way we could say it is, since I know that a third is equal to 0.3 repeating, I could say 0.3 repeating x equals -2. Now, if I put an A, B, and a C here, an A, a B, and a C, which one is the most common way for us to interpret that? B would be the most common way. We're going to say B because a third of x is simply x divided into 3 parts. And the reason why we like that is because we'd multiply both sides by 3 to isolate the variable. X equals -6. If we did choose to do A, now we have a multiplier of negative. So the coefficient is a third. If I divide by a third, since I'm multiplying by a third, if I divide by a third here and divide by a third here, multiplying by a third and dividing by a third cancel each other out. How did we learn how to divide by a third in grade 8? Do you divide by fractions? You multiply by the reciprocal. So this would become multiplication by the reciprocal of a third, which is still 3. And therefore, you'd still get the same answer of -6.